My name is MaryAlice Lopez, and I am an obstetrician and gynecologist, OBGYN, here in Boise, Idaho. I lived here up through graduating high school, and then left for schooling, moved around quite a bit, but came back shortly after residency. It wasn't always foregone that I would come back, but I love Boise, I love the community here, love the seasons. Idaho in general for the outdoors and everything it has to offer. And then my family's here as well, and so being closer also made sense. I didn't know I wanted to practice medicine. I worked for an OBGYN office in the front office, so not a clinical staff member at all, and realized I was really drawn to women's health. I really respected the doctor I worked for and her dedication to her patients and her practice, and really got interested in it. So I decided to go to medical school. When I asked for a letter of recommendation and said, you need to know what you want your life to look like because this job can be consuming. And so when I was in medical school, I really tried to like other specialties more. And I kept coming back to OBGYN. I think I felt a strong connection to women's health in that, I saw myself in my patients. There are a lot of practices in the area that didn't directly offer terminations or abortions for all reasons, but it was always accessible. And there was a really good network of referrals and being able to get patients where they needed to be. And I did not expect to see that go away. And I think for me, it was a big moment because especially where I trained, it was the opposite. There was a lot of access. We had really comprehensive care that we could provide to our patients. It was amazing to see how much we could help and impact in so many ways. And then to see that taken away and the opposite happen where we're not helping people. These laws are completely hindering, creating barriers, really impacting people's lives in a negative way for both patients and providers alike. And so for me, it was a moment of, am I staying here? Am I going to keep looking for a place to practice in the area when I feel really limited in what I can provide to people? I didn't know what this was going to look like or how it was going to affect us. And no one knowing. Yeah. No one knowing, and also all of us having an idea of what would happen. Like, there were delays in care, people needing to be flown out, potentially negative outcomes because of people having to be transferred in scenarios that could be really dangerous, like people leaving the state, our providers leaving the state. Those are all things that we could predict ahead of time. You hope it doesn't happen, but we could kind of see the writing on the wall, and then unfortunately, all of those things have happened. And so that also has continued to be a source of frustration throughout all of this. We have a demanding job. It's demanding physically, time-wise, emotionally. And so our colleagues are very important parts of our lives. They ranging from just being friends outside of work to being shoulders to lean on when we're at work. And especially then too, once you're here for a while, you end up taking care of people or you get taken care of by people And so it really is kind of a weaving of those lives. It's devastating to see colleagues leave who would not have otherwise left if these laws hadn't been put into place. But for their safety, their sanity, their ability to continue what they do have left is really, really devastating, especially when they're such good providers and really taking great care of the people here, and then to see them leave is so sad. You kind of have to, in some way, leave things at the doorstep, or the second the garage door opens, you're somewhere else. I think it's a constant struggle for all of us to not let work affect our personal life too much. And I think we all kind of find our coping mechanisms, whether that's having outlets with each other, with other providers, exercise, everyone has their hobby, those things, our families, but it's hard. I feel like I've seen a lot of the delays in care, and I think as things get busier and there are fewer providers and fewer people who are established, they don't know where to call, they don't know where to get advice, and it ends up being a huge delay to care and a big danger to our patients. There are some who are very well informed, and I think there are some who are not and haven't really had to think about it until they come in. And there's just confusion, especially at the beginning and the way some of the things are written. It's confusing for us even. And I think that's a huge part of the problem, and that medicine and what we do is so nuanced that there's no way that you can detail it all out so that it works in every scenario. One of the biggest things is that people, if they don't know, they are scared to ask because they don't know if who they're talking to is a safe person to talk to. Can I ask about an abortion? Can I say that? And that is devastating because we're supposed to be a safety net. We're supposed to be who you can come to and talk about, ask all the questions, get, an honest answer, and people feel really hesitant and scared. Two scenarios I can think of immediately was a newly pregnant patient who, in the visit as we're talking, and this is actually someone I had known prior to that visit, I could sense hesitance and I couldn't figure out what it was. And by the end of the visit, we came out and she asked about the laws and how this could affect her and what she should do to keep herself safe. And that was what was holding her back, of kind of being open. And then a second scenario was a patient who was much further along in her pregnancy, very desired pregnancy, and she also didn't know if it would affect her or not. And for her, she was at a stage that it wouldn't, far enough along where we would be able to deliver the baby if anything came up. But she also was very nervous that some of the restrictions would apply to her. And so the confusion is just really widespread. I don't know where there's more fear, but there is definitely fear on both sides. But I think it's probably a bit more pervasive for providers because it's constant. Whereas if a patient, for example, is pregnant and has a fear for this scenario, like at some point she will not be pregnant. So that fear ends and she gets to move on. That doesn't happen for us. Like, we are doing this every day. One little silver lining in all of this is that you kind of find your community. And I've found a beautiful community here that allows us to keep trying to move to a better spot with all of this, because so many of us are trying to change it, trying to do the best job we can for our patients every day, and seeing that is uplifting. For me personally, I have a different focus on if people are adequately protecting themselves. Like if they are using a contraception, a birth control option that is appropriate for them, that they're using as it should be used, that, if they have medical conditions, is that affecting? And these are all things we thought about before, but really stressing and making sure every patient that I see is in the least chance of becoming pregnant if they don't want to be. If people don't want to be pregnant and don't want to be experiencing, the really large burden, beautiful burden, but burden that is having a child, they shouldn't be. I think that was one of the reasons that drew me from early on, is that I never saw myself separate from the patients. It always felt like we are all the same. We all need care at some point. And sometimes people have this view of doctors, oh, well, they're not going to get sick, or this isn't going to happen to them. And that's not true at all. We're humans. And for those of us with, the ability to get pregnant, then, we're right there with our patients. And so I think I felt really lucky because my health literacy is high and my knowledge of pregnancy and the laws and how it works on a day-to-day basis, like I know that. And a lot of people asked if I had more fear about my experience. And for someone who definitely has anxiety and fear around all of this, I felt really at peace with what was happening to me. I felt like my care team was great. If something had come up, that put me in a dangerous position, I felt like I knew they would do everything they could within their control to take care of me, and that's all they can do. I had a weird sense of peace with that throughout the whole pregnancy. There's kind of a little bit of surrender in that I'm getting pregnant, and then part of this I can't control. Even though it's happening in my body, I can't control it all the time. And so we're just responding to what's happening. And for those that aren't as familiar with it, they don't know. Like we can't prevent miscarriages. Not everybody knows that. And so I felt really lucky that I had that level of knowledge as I was going through it. And the other thing that I feel exceedingly grateful for is my support system. And I see people all the time that don't have it. Throughout pregnancy, after delivery, they don't have the community and village that they should have to raise a family. And so, like I said, I felt grateful for a lot of things during my pregnancy. Even though there absolutely was some fear for it, I feel like I have much more fear as a provider of having something happen to someone, letting someone down, making the wrong decision than I had as a patient. I think the thing that sticks out more recently is just patients saying thank you. Thank you for staying. I've had many people, I would say, in like the last 6 months to a year, whereas this didn't happen at the beginning, and whether that's because people weren't aware of it or kind of didn't think it was a big deal to stay in Idaho because not as many people had left yet, but it's happening very regularly and consistently where people are saying thank you for staying, and also sometimes like I'm sorry for what you're having to go through. And that feels big when people come in for something they need and care they deserve. To have them step out of that and be grateful is really, it feels poignant, and it helps. On the other side of things, I've had people that are kind of complaining when they come in. Like, it took me 4 months to get in for my annual. Yeah. Like, we don't have the capacity to get people in as fast as we used to for routine things. We try to, but there are a lot of urgent or emergent things that need to be seen timely. And so those, completely unfortunately, those routine things sometimes have to get pushed out. And that's just going to get worse if more people leave, if there's fewer of us. Initially, when when the bans took place and then the maternal mortality and morbidity review committee was ended, you're not going to see these negative outcomes for people if you're not looking for them. And so that, I think, is another thing that we have to make sure of too, is that we're looking at all these downstream effects, because we won't be able to say, this happened because of it if we don't look for it. The people that are here really want to be here and are really doing their absolute best to take care of people, both our patients and each other. And that is very true. But it's hard. If I had lived out of state and this happened, I don't think I would have moved back. Idaho doesn't have all the resources to keep people here. Like, we don't have an OBGYN residency in the state. So it's going to be even more difficult for that. And there are good studies that show the majority of people stay within 100 miles of their residency. So that's hard for the state, and I don't see a world in which we could ever have one with these restrictive laws in place. It's everyone that is coming together to move this forward in a positive direction. For me, it's really kind of an educator role, and also almost like a guide, because there are a lot of scenarios that we can't change the outcome. There are a lot we can, but not always. And sometimes we are just there to walk with our patient through this life experience. You know, my role is to educate, to provide, you know, the possibilities in whatever scenario we're in, and then allowing the patient to kind of take that and see how it fits into their life. Obviously, there are scenarios where there's a very clear thing to do in that moment, and then we also have to stress that. But I think a lot of what we do, especially as OBGYNs, and in those scenarios we can't always control, we're just holding space for people and trying to protect, you know, the respect and the meaning and the beauty that they have in their own life. There's a vast lack of knowledge of pregnancy, of what supporting life means. And I think it's also, whatever view they have is very narrow, in that it's not the same for everyone, right? We all have our own values and belief system that we work within. And so them imparting theirs on each on everyone is inappropriate. It's inadequate. And so, you know, there are so many scenarios where we have to protect mothers for their family. And sometimes that means making choices for that pregnancy. So, yeah, I think lack of knowledge, not acknowledging the nuance in every scenario, and just, you know, this group is, like I said, kind of imparting their belief system on others, and that's not what we're here to do. We're here to support you, each individual, in their own choices and their journey. I think one of the biggest things is, if you don't feel comfortable with someone you're seeing, this is for patients specifically, see someone else. And I know that is hard to say, because sometimes that takes a lot of time, a lot of patience. But we are here to support each individual in their journey. We are not making unilateral decisions, which I think some of the fear-mongering kind of makes it out to seem like the doctor's making the decision to perform an abortion. That is not how this works. We are here to support the patient in their choices. If they aren't safe, or if there could be, you know, risk to that, then we should be explaining and educating the patient on that. But we are not making unilateral decisions. And so I just want all my patients to know, like, we should be a safe space for you, and you should be able to ask questions, explore things, and learn, so to move forward. We need to find the little glimmers and really hold on to those, because the negative things and the tragedies stick more, unfortunately. But we also need to remember, you know, all of the beautiful things we've been able to do, the people we were able to save, the colleagues we have that are supportive, and really it's that community, and the community of patients too, that are happy and grateful we're here.